right, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your gracious, humble host, Richie Mars, and I am here with a special guest, a three-peater on the show. He is the classic man himself. He's known wrestling his whole entire life, in and out of all his life. Seth, it's great to have you back here.
Great to be here, Richie. Thanks for having me for a third time.
Absolutely. I couldn't tackle this topic without you because we're talking about your main man, your guy, Triple H, and
Triple
his
H. Yes.
reign. Yes, his reign of creative and also his reign of creative NXT and how he brought some NXT aspects and how his creative run has gone so far. Because even though we know Vince McMahon still has his fingerprints on creative, even though he says he's not going to be in the weeds anymore, I think we know that he's going to have at least some say in creative. But majority of this year has been primarily Triple H and his vision. Now, before we jump the gun here, how would you grade his year of the main roster creative so far?
I think he's done a great job. To me, um, Raw is and SmackDown have both been fantastic. I almost I feel as if I'm watching at times you know NXT Black and Gold again, especially on Monday nights because most of that roster is the old NXT Black and Gold. And it's just you know it doesn't. Are there some things that I don't like? Yes. But at the same time, overall, I think the product is fantastic right now.
What are those things that you might not
What
like?
drives me nuts is
Mhm.
when they do the entrances and then they do a commercial break and then they come back and they go to a backstage promo and then you come back and the people are still standing in the ring, you know, like hey, I'm still here.
Yeah. I do remember there was a time, and this was during the tail end of Vince's quote unquote retirement, was it would be the 10:30 hour of Raw, and the main event would come out. There'll be a commercial, backstage segment, cut to in the ring, goes over the card for the next week,
Right?
and then back in commercial, and
And
then
by
we
the
get the
time the
other
main event
entrance.
starts, it's ten to 11,
Yeah, it's about 10:15, or 10:50, excuse me.
and you got to wonder, like, dude, for the people that are standing in the ring with their thumb up their butt, basically, what's going on?
And
uh,
I do like, at least with the Triple H, how the shows have been formatted. I
yes,
feel like they've been paced very well.
I
Like
think
you
so.
have the strong opening segment, whether it's like the Bloodline, Judgment Day, Seth Rollins, Cody
Hmm.
Rhodes, and that would set up that kind of storyline for the show, and then it would progressively build throughout the night. And another thing I like for the shows, you're having guys who normally wouldn't interact with each other interact. Like you
Yes.
had for the longest time, if you weren't in the story with the bloodline, you were just in that story. But now throughout the night, you're seeing things like I think a couple weeks ago, Solo Sokoa just like spiked Rich Holland, and that
Hmm.
led to Sheamus coming out
Yes.
challenging Solo, and that had that little story arc. You know what I mean? And that's what I think wrestling was missing for the longest time. It was just the same guys interacting
Hmm.
every single week, and it was getting repetitive. I remember there was a time where on Raw it was John Cena, Randy Orton, Triple H, some combination of those three.
And it was the same match every other week, rematch from last week, or you'd have the singles match and then there'd be interference which would lead to a tag team match the following week. And it was like the same recipe for the longest time. But I do like, you know with Raw especially too, it seems almost like the Judgment Day is the focal point of that show, kind of, very, very much like the way the Bloodline has been the focal point on SmackDown.
And that's another thing that is crazy because years ago, we wouldn't be talking about factions or all
Right.
these giant factions that are happening because WWE wasn't really a place where factions ran rampant unless you were a DX or Nation of Domination back in the 90s. So we haven't really seen groups or
Yeah.
factions being challenged or unopposed. Like we had Evolution for a little bit, we had Legacy, but they weren't nearly as dominating
Right.
as Evolution or some of those other factions. Do you think having these different groups helps the show variety, or do you think the Judgment Day and Bloodline stories are more of the same, just a different coat of paint?
I think you could say a little of both. I think first of all, I think this is probably the most factions we've seen probably since '97 when you had the Heart Foundation, DX,
Right.
Disciples of Apocalypse, Nation of Domination. You know, it was great for factions, and then they pretty much did away with factions. Aside from the Evolution, you know, and a handful of groups here and there, but what's good, you go back to what factions have always been good for, right? It's to elevate new talent, you know, with your existing players, and whether it's Roman, who is like look, let's be realistic, Roman has made everybody around him great with the bloodline, you know.
100%. Yeah.
I can't remember a time where the Usos were ever main eventers. I mean, there was a time when they were tag team champions and wouldn't even be on the card for WrestleMania,
Which is a
right?
huge
And that,
spin in the face.
all right, and now they're main eventing WrestleMania. Look at Raw. Look at the Judgment Day. Which was a group that was started by Edge. That, let's be honest, when it first started, everyone was like, it got a lot of negative heat by people online.
Yeah,
You
because it
know,
was more of the same but
They-
different. You know what I
right?
mean? Where it's just like it seemed like an off-brand brood, and
And
now,
and if you remember too, people were complaining, oh my god, this isn't even Edge. He cut his hair, and this is not the Edge that we're you. And then they kicked out Edge, and Edge came back, and but look at Finn. Finn is the character that if people followed NXT, this is the Finn that we got as a heel in NXT. This is when Rhea first came up to the main roster, she was they had her tag team and with various ladies. She
mhm,
never really, yeah, she was the women's champion at one point, but I mean, dude, it was for a quick flash in the pan before Charlotte would win it back. Now Rhea is the dominant woman on Raw. Where to the point where I'm kind of looking forward to seeing her maybe wrestle some guys at some point.
right?
Uh,
Yeah,
because she could.
she did
Um,
beat Tozawa.
she did, yeah.
Yeah.
You got Damian Priest, who was a big star. When he was in NXT, he was the North American champion. He came up. They put him, they put him in as a face. He wrestled against the Miz and John Morrison at WrestleMania with Bad Bunny and had a U.S. title run. But then, following year, he wasn't even on WrestleMania.
Hmm.
This is the biggest he's ever been. And do we really need to? Can we ignore Dominic right now? I mean, Dominic's getting the most negative heat. I mean, I can't wait to be at SummerSlam just because I want to be part of that when he's getting booed out of the building.
Yeah, and such there we live in a timeline where they had a group. Edge was the one kicked out, and they brought in Dominic Mysterio, and it
Yeah,
turned out to be the best decision for
right.
that group. And it's one of those things where I don't think if Vince was in charge, they would pull that trigger. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I feel like in this regime of Triple H's based creative, I think there's been a lot more risk taking. Because if you remember, the week after, I think they were doing that United States triple threat tournament with a couple of matches, and I could see the differences already. Like the matches were longer, and it was guys that weren't getting prominent television time or spotlight.
right.
Like you had Chad Gable, he kind of like came out to crickets, but if you look at that now with the whole Maxine Dupree and Otis and the Alpha Academy thing, it's just goes to show from a year's time, so many people are
Mm-hmm.
better off for
Oh
like
yeah.
this chance of creative of giving them that chance of TV time without just kind of pigeonholing them into a
Yes.
certain storyline. Because even last week when you had the Viking rules match, which was an awesome match,
Awesome.
people wouldn't have given that a second look if it was the same booking a year ago.
There's a chance a year ago or a year and a half or 2 years ago that match might have ended in some kind of Viking dance contest or something. I mean, think back to when the Viking Raiders and the Street Profits were hanging out off camera.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
Trying to get to know each other. Yes, there's a good chance that Viking rules match might have ended in a Viking dance or something a year ago. So, I loved it last week, but who knows what that would have been like a year ago.
I like,
And we I think we even spoke about this when I was on your show for the first time
mhm.
before WrestleMania. I think I don't know if we spoke about it on air or if it was before we went on air, but I think when Dom first turned on Ray at Clash of the Castle, I know myself, my first reaction was, oh great, another family rivalry that we're gonna, dude, the way they built that up, that was I was looking forward to that match probably more than any other match at WrestleMania. And
Another thing that, yeah,
I love this Dominic Mysterio character, dude. They got him down in NXT. You know, I mean, when he went up to Wesley, he's like, "Are you the open challenge guy?" And Wesley was like, "I haven't done that, bro, in weeks, months." And Tom's like, "I accept." Like that was great. You know?
and another thing is with the Dominic Mysterio thing that Triple H has done a lot more of is incorporating the .com or the YouTube channel, because
Yes.
remember they had all those holiday Rey Mysterio skits of
Yes.
him going to Thanksgiving, he went to Christmas, he got arrested, and that's where
Rested.
the
Yes.
dirty Dominic Mysterio
He went to jail
came
for
from.
3 hours. Yeah.
And even though this didn't happen, it started out successfully at first. The Bray Wyatt White Rabbit sort of things, when you had the codes in the backgrounds of segments so people can look up.
Hmm.
And his return got a massive ovation, And I think just with Triple H bringing about all these guys that Vince released before he stepped down is added a new depth to the roster. And not only that, even though a lot of them aren't necessarily pushed, a lot of them are in at least semi prominent programs, because you have
And they're
a.
on and they're on TV. You know.
I do wish we could get Tegan Knox some more shine. She deserves some more shine after
Yes.
everything
Wasn't
she's
she
been through.
hurt?
She was. I don't think she's been hurt since she's been back.
Okay.
I know she's on Raw.
Is she on Raw?
Yeah, she
I
was
know. I know. We
supplementing.
saw her in the tag team tournament, but I'm saying
Yeah,
for a while I thought she was hurt.
I don't.
I
I
mean,
don't
listen,
believe she was hurt.
she, phenomenal. I mean, I think that the way they're using the roster, is like you said, they're using men and women that normally wouldn't have even been used except for in backstage segments. And even if they're in a tag team tournament in a random tag team, they're being used. You know,
I mean, look at
and
LA Knight. He was Max Dupree.
right?
Triple H said, "We're gonna put that to the side. We're gonna let you be you."
Yeah,
And compared to when he got back to now, LA
yeah,
Knight is one of the most popular superstars, and he hasn't been in a
yeah,
storyline since the Bray Wyatt thing. Think about
yeah.
that. Since
Think about that.
January, he
You know,
hasn't been in a storyline, but he still increased his
yeah,
popularity just by his mic work, promos, meme ability, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's a major difference between this era and a year ago, is that
agreed.
guys are getting a chance to succeed on their own. My only
Yes.
concern for LA Knight, even though it's not a bad position to be in, is being that Hurricane Zack Ryder type of guy, where you're popular, but you're selling merch, but you're just not going to be a fixation on
I, d-
TV.
I think it'll be a little bit more than that. And again, I don't work for
I agree. I
WWE.
agree.
Yeah, and I
But
don't work for WWE, and I'm not going to pretend that I know what goes on behind the scenes.
I mean, none of us do.
Right. But, there are people that will say, oh, I know what's going on behind. I'm going to say now, this is just my impression, right? And I think, I almost called him Eli. LA Knight is, I think he's a Triple H guy. I mean, dude, Triple H brought him into NXT. He was a
Hmm.
black and gold guy. And I think if anyone Triple H has loyalty to are the black and gold guys,
Right.
and all those black and gold guys and girls that he's brought up, they're doing well and they're in prominent spots on the card, you know.
We
And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh well, L.A. Knight, he didn't win this, he didn't win King of the Ring. He's not done. He's not done.
No,
You
he
know,
still has a
he's got a
lot
lot.
more
He's got a
to
lot more
give.
in him.
And
Yeah.
I think there it was like a couple weeks ago. Like I saw him do a triple jump moonsault, like a springboard, and I was just like, I've never seen him do that before. And again, his stuff looks very unconventional. It's not. I don't want to say sloppy is the right term. It's just a lot of it looks kind of rough.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, that's kind of his style. And then a
That's his
lot of people
style.
say he's like The Rock or Stone Cold ripoff. I'm just like, You know what? If I was trying to
He,
be successful, I'd probably rip off the greatest of
yeah.
all
I mean,
time
look,
too. You know.
you look at his, you look at his age category, and you look at when he first started getting into wrestling 20 years ago. Look who was around. It was Stone Cold and The Rock.
And I mean, if you think about it, just majority of the main eventers we have in WWE are the same age as LA Knight, if not
Yeah,
around that age
yeah.
rank. I
I
think
mean,
Cody and Roman are 37.
7. Yeah,
Miz is in his 40s. Uh, let's see, who else? Who else? Rey Mysterio,
Rey
practically
Mysterio's
in his
there.
50s.
Rey Mysterio is just, he's like the guy who can't. He's never going to stop. I mean, he's looks phenomenal. You know,
Stem cells are amazing thing. What can I
right?
say?
It's not even. Yeah, I mean, if we all had access to this, we'd all be jumping around like Rey Mysterio. Edge, Edge is,
Edge is still coming around.
I mean, I think he's at
Bobby Lashley.
Bobby Lashley just turned 47. I think they said, right. I saw
Yeah,
online.
yeah, it's
Bobby
crazy.
Lashley looks. You find me a 20-year-old that looks better than Bobby Lashley. I'll
And
wait.
it's amazing how the talent pool, even though a year ago was the same, now has dramatically shifted just because
Right.
of the different additions that we've had
And how
so
about
far
this
throughout
one
that.
too? Go back to Bobby Lashley for a second, because I think we were texting the other night,
Hmm.
right? And I'm like, not for nothing. Has anyone seen Bobby Lashley? And all
Right.
of a sudden Bobby Lashley appears
He
on TV. Like,
appears on
oh,
the Lemo.
there
Yeah.
he is. And here's a guy who clearly maybe he was, again, maybe he was nursing an injury. Who knows?
Hmm.
But shows up, right? A little bit of a clean the slate a little bit because things obviously got wonky with WrestleMania plans, right? Now he shows up and it looks like he's putting a faction together. Here's a guy who hasn't been in the ring in months, except for that tournament. And you know, again, he comes on. He's a big time player. And whether they're gearing him up for a run against Roman or he's putting his faction together, which I kind of like your name for the group too. Um,
Or
the
the Almighty Prophets.
Almighty Prophets, yeah,
And another thing about this era, nobody feels overexposed. If they
yeah,
don't have creative plans for you, they're not just going to put you in a 2 minute, 3 minute, five
yeah,
minute match, you know? They pretty much take a step back saying, all right, let's put this guy in ice a little bit. So when he comes back, a lot of people are being like, oh, yeah, he's back. And now something's different about
yeah.
him because
You
of
know,
these new creative plans.
and I think I think back to like when I was a kid growing up. I started watching wrestling in the '80s. And you know, TV was different back then. With Saturday morning superstars or Sunday morning wrestling challenge,
Right, right.
where they would TV tape those a month out. But you didn't see the same guys on that every week. You know, you'd see a guy, you'd see the guys, and go against enhancement talent, but you wouldn't see the same people every week per se. you know so you didn't get bored seeing the same people against the same people every week. You maybe see the same enhancement talent every week, but no one was probably tuning in for them anyway. But now it's, yeah, these guys and girls, I like the way they're being used. Almost
I,
very NXT-ish, where you don't see the same people every week on NXT either.
and especially with when it comes to the premium live events too, or the pay-per-views, where I feel like this year there's been a quality show per month every time of the
Every time.
pay-per-view,
Yes.
and they don't overshoot it with matches. They don't, like WrestleMania split down for, I think, like couple, I think, 7 matches a
I
show
was
or
to say
something.
7 or 8. Yeah.
But that they've stuck to that number, and the matches aren't multi-mans. It's not battle royals. It's not all these things just trying to get everybody on the show. It's, if it makes sense, let's put them on the show.
Hmm.
And that's what I like a lot about this era, where it feels like we're given a chance to breathe and not saying, "Oh, who's this guy? Who's this guy?" I think there's going to be a couple of that. I remember there's a battle royal and like Von Wagner was in it, and I was just like, "Why is Von Wagner here?" You
So
know?
it's funny you should say that, because I think that that goes back to what we were talking about before with the draft.
Hmm.
You know, there were people that were drafted, and you wonder why were they drafted, because we haven't seen them.
Right.
Von Wagner, um,
Odyssey Jones,
Odyssey Jones. I think was Zion. Zion was a
Zion
draft.
Quinn
Yeah,
is a
Quinn.
free
I think
agent. Yeah,
but he was drafted as a free agent. I mean,
yeah,
haven't seen them since that battle royal.
yeah.
You know,
It's just one of those things where it's like, if we don't have creative plans for you, you'll be a free agent.
yeah.
I think Dolph Ziggler was a free agent at one
Omas is
point.
a free agent.
Yeah, but they negotiated. So
Yes.
we'll see what that. We haven't seen Omos since the Seth Rollins match, so who
Yeah.
knows what they have planned for him.
Maybe,
But another thing,
maybe he'll end up with the Almighty Prophets.
yeah, maybe. But another thing I like about going tying it back to Bobby Lashley, because Bobby Lashley was the United States champion when Triple H took over, was the resurgence of the United States and the Intercontinental Championships, respectively.
Oh yeah.
Easily the best thing, in my opinion, Triple H has done since he took over the creative reins. How do the mid card? I hate using mid card because
Yeah.
they're prestigious championships. How different do they feel from 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
There was a time 5, 10 years ago. I mean, you could easily not even find those titles on a major pay per view.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was growing up, the Intercontinental title was the second I almost said most powerful, most prestigious title on the show. It was that guy who was the Intercontinental champion was almost next in line, basically, to be the next big time player. Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior, right? Um, Rick Rude was Intercontinental champion. I mean, so many people went from that Intercontinental title to being world champion or close to world champion. You know, they could headline a show. Then we went through a time period where you forgot we even had an Intercontinental title. And it was basically it was tossed around almost as easily as the 24/7 championship at times. Um, I I don't want to do this, or I don't want to say this, but I'm gonna say it. You could probably go down a list and ask me, give me a wrestler's name and say Intercontinental Champion, yes or no, and I probably wouldn't be able to guess some from 10 years ago.
I'm
And
guessing
that's not good.
you don't remember Ezekiel Jackson as Intercontinental Champion.
I did not remember Ezekiel as Intercontinental
How
Champion.
about Albert?
Albert was Intercontinental Champion. Yeah, I forgot about that one too.
Yeah, yeah. You see, it's just like with Gunther and how he's been portrayed,
Never gonna forget
and
about Gunther. Yes,
yeah, and how he made this championship that almost, with all due respect, nobody really took a
wanted
second
it.
glance at. If you think about it, last year's WrestleMania, the Intercontinental Championship wasn't even on the show,
No.
and this year's WrestleMania, they arguably had the match of the night.
Oh my God. I tell you, the section I was sitting in for night two, clearly there were two matches that everybody was on the edge of their seat for. That one and the main event. You know, the Roman and Cody. Um, the entrance that Gunther comes down with. It's such a prestigious entrance too.
Hmm.
Comes down with his faction Imperium, which again, faction that was born on NXT Black and Gold. And when
And
Gunther
was
first,
reunited when Triple H
yes,
took over too. Yeah.
just what I was about to say. I mean, when they first, if you remember, when they first brought up Imperium, it was just Ludwig Kaiser, and Gunther. They left Giovanni behind.
Hmm.
They all got their names changed by the previous creative crew. And I think that was when Gunther first came up. I think that was the biggest wrestling headlines wasn't even that Gunther and Imperium had made the jump to the main roster. It was Walter had his name changed to
That
Gunther.
was a big controversy at the
Yeah.
time.
Now, dude, come on. I mean, he's Gunther, right
Now
now.
it's like it's kind of like fitting on like a new pair of jeans. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
could
you
be a
got to
little
break him in.
snug. You gotta break them in a little bit. And I think a lot of people's fears were because of how Gunther looked, which at the time he wasn't carrying the six pack that he has now.
Nope.
The body. He was a little
Compare.
bit he was a
Yeah.
little bit like heftier than most, but he put in the work and he became a respected like ring general, as
Yeah.
they say. I will say I do miss Giovanni Vinci's NXT character
Yes.
just because he showed a lot more personality in NXT than he had
When he was on his
in the
own.
main roster. Yeah,
Yeah.
where
But
where
but
he'd
this was his
smile and the camera would face. Yeah,
but this was his character when he was when he was in Imperium. The two of them were just silent, and the only time they really spoke was when they were doing the introduction that we only seem to get on the big shows now. You know,
yeah.
when when Ludwig Kaiser tells everyone to ladies and gentlemen, and he introduces the ring general. So
I
yeah,
like how they make the Intercontinental Championship. The U.S. title, unfortunately, hasn't had that. It kind of comes and goes with its prestige, but with the Intercontinental Championship, it makes it feel like a big fight feel, even if it's a
yes,
television match. I remember they built up Xavier Woods when he had an Intercontinental Championship match. They built
They
up,
built up Mustafa Ali.
yeah, they built up Mustafa, which only had a 1 or 2 week build.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And the impressive amount of opponents that's went through Gunther and his reign of dominance
yeah,
is incredibly varied. When before, when you have an Intercontinental Championship or a US Championship, it might be one long feud between people. Remember, and I love both these guys, when Miz and Dolph Ziggler for half the year seemingly were the only ones
yes.
challenging for the Intercontinental Championship.
They would do that, or they would have the Intercontinental Champion wrestle members of a tag team. You know, one week he'd wrestle one member of the tag team, and the next week he'd wrestle the other member of a tag team. You know, and then you start
Yeah.
to wonder why is the tag team even wrestling in singles matches to begin with?
And another thing with the Intercontinental Championship, there was a time where they would just have one-on-one matches and they would lose all the time. I remember Wade
Yeah,
Barrett doing that a lot. I remember Miz doing that a lot.
yeah.
I remember uh let's see who else, Ambrose did that for a while. You
It was
know,
almost like the belt was a prop at one point.
it became, if you have the Intercontinental or US titles, then we like you, but we don't really have any
Right.
plans for you, and we'll
So
get it off of you once we figure out the plans for you. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So it was almost like a blessing and a curse. Pro, you get the title. Con, you're going to be in creative limbo for X amount of months or what have you.
I do like Austin Theory. I do like what they've done with him. You know, um, to me he's done a great job as U.S. champion. You know, for what it is and for what it's worth, the reigns for both Intercontinental and U.S. championships are longer. You're not seeing guys win it one week and lose it 2 weeks later.
Right.
You
I
know,
will say with, and you bring up an interesting point with Austin Theory, because when Triple H took over creative, it seemed like Austin Theory kind of got not lost in the shuffle, but he was
you got to reset.
he got a hard reset. You know, he
Hmm.
wasn't doing the cell phone thing anymore. He was being a little bit more serious. He had money in the bank, but
Hmm.
he was losing all the
Yeah.
time, as most money in the bank contract holders were.
J- j-
Do you think certain superstars, have you noticed any of them regress during the Triple H era as opposed to the Vince McMahon era? Because I could think of a couple.
you mean guys that were like Vince guys that
Yeah, now we don't really see them on TV as much.
such as who?
We got Omos. He was very
Oh,
prominent in the Vince era.
haven't seen Omos. Yeah.
uh, Ezekiel or Elias.
Uh, What happened? What happened to Elias since the
I,
draft?
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
Since they draft, I actually thought they were. I liked the idea that they were going with for a while with
the Ezekiel.
Elias and Rick Boogs as a tag team.
Yeah, I thought that would have legs on it, but now it's like
Yeah.
we don't see. And that's another thing with the Triple H thing. It seems like there's a lot of setup, but sometimes you'll get like a couple weeks where
Like, yeah, we
they're
don't like.
not going to have
Yeah.
follow up. You know, like the Candice LeRae, Nikki Cross storyline, where they were building up like Candice was freaked out by Nikki,
Hmm.
that would stop, and then it's like, oh, we'll pick it up again in like another 3 weeks, and then it would stop again. You know, and whether it's time cuts or
Well,
whatever have it,
Nikki did go back to get her master's degree.
she did, yes, and
Yes,
congratulations to that.
but
But it's
yeah,
like
I know what you're saying. You
it's
know,
just like you have a couple of names that have been kind of lost in the shuffle. We talked about Bobby Lashley. There was a tease of a Hurt Business reunion earlier in the year, and
hmm
that really didn't get followed up on.
we haven't
You
seen
know,
really haven't seen Shelton and Cedric.
so there's been a couple of times where it's like, oh, we got hope for these guys are being used, and it's gone.
Gone.
So
Yeah,
nothing is perfect in this regime, but it's
I
like they
do.
do try to give plans to everybody.
Yeah, I listen. You're seeing new life for some people like Ali down in NXT.
Absolutely. And
You
we
know,
should talk about NXT, because before it was NXT 2.0,
yes,
and now it's white and gold, I guess, NXT.
it's
Which is a perfect fusion between the black and gold and the
yes.
2.0 mindset and formula.
You know,
When you saw Black and Gold turn into 2.0, what was your initial reaction?
oh no, I I loved Black and Gold. And I understood. They want those guys. They were, for whatever people thought, they were outperforming the main roster. And I mean, Black and Gold was probably the biggest competition for Raw or SmackDown at the time. And it's supposed to be developmental. Fine. All those guys that were down there at the time, they're all up in the main roster right now. They're mostly all on Raw.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you go through an episode of Raw and you're like, this is great. And it's all guys that were on NXT Black and Gold. Um,
Right.
it's, and I do like, what they've done with NXT now, and bringing down guys to NXT to help out, or just run story. Like, how about this one? How about Baron Corbin?
Right. Yeah.
Baron Corbin, for the longest time, was, he was on the main roster, but he wasn't really. I mean, he went through character after character. I mean, now they're actually building his character. When he burned his stuff a couple weeks ago, and burned all his past gimmicks. I mean, I'm more interested in what Baron Corbin's going to do now in NXT than I was, when he was Constable Corbin on Raw, or Happy Corbin with JBL. So
I absolutely agree because it just seemed like he was going from gimmick to gimmick. He was the
yeah,
constable, and then he was the king, and then he was the bum, and then he was
happy.
happy, and then he
Hmm.
was Baron with JBL, and
Yeah,
then that didn't work, unfortunately. So it
yeah,
was a lot of start and stops, but that shows that they do have faith in him because he is a very good performer in his own right. Now he's getting a different character where he's I guess the vignette now is he saw himself in the woods,
yes,
so now we'll see where that turns up, you know what I mean? But what I like about this regime, it's not like, oh, this didn't work, you're kind of like written off, you're done,
yeah. You're
you
done.
know
Good day,
now
sir.
it's like, all right, let's see like what works, and let's see if we can push it. Perfect example, the Sami Zayn bloodline story. You know what I mean? And even Sami Zayn said in an interview with Ariel Hawani that he didn't notice, like, if you notice on TV, he wasn't interacting with Roman. The second Vince got out of creative, he was shown more interacting with Roman.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So again, it's one of those things where I reiterate that seeing pairings you wouldn't expect to work together.
Sami Zayn is an NXT Black and Gold guy. He's a Triple H guy.
Yeah,
You
same
know.
thing with Kevin Owens. Remember, he
Yeah,
was doing the paranoid Elias thing
yeah,
or Ezekiel thing, and now he was the prize fighter, and now he's kind of going back to that angry outburst thing. But at least they kind of explained it, and they were
yes,
also the relationships they had with Sammy and KO and
hmm,
Cody. That they didn't just abandon that after WrestleMania. That's been
yes,
brought up, and that's another thing that I appreciate Triple H does because Triple H
yes,
is a fan of the business. It's recalling past events,
yes, yeah.
and referencing the past. When I feel like WWE sometimes, when Vince was in charge, would do anything to get away
Forget.
from that
Yes,
past, and just like make you forget or create their own past. Like WWE rarely like. I remember the biggest retcon was when Edge and Christian were friends and not brothers.
yes.
That always drew me crazy.
But I thought they were brothers. No,
Yeah,
no, he's my best friend.
and I'm like, okay, he's like my brother. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you got around it.
Yes,
I
yes.
will say a big swing and a miss for the Triple H regime has been the women's division to a certain extent. Not for match quality, just with
Okay.
the angles that are involved. Because with Bianca, I would have liked to see Bianca having more of a story with her instead of the EST. She's the EST, and
Okay.
she was feuding with Damage Control for a while, and all the Damage Control feuds seem to be the same. You're outnumbered, and then
Hmm.
we'll even the odds. And with Bianca, it's more of it's really hard to write that kind of John Cena as character without
Hmm.
showing the multifacets of that character, the struggles when you're supposed to be the best, and when
So,
you're
yeah. No, I
go on
was
and
I was just gonna say, her original NXT character, she was a heel,
yeah,
and I was hoping, it seemed like they were going to bring that back a couple weeks ago, and they still might. But heel Bianca in NXT when she was undefeated,
Hmm.
I loved her.
Right.
I feel, I hear what you're saying,
Hmm.
um, and it's almost like Triple H and his regime. They inherited this Bianca character, but it's not the character that they made in NXT. If that
Right.
makes
Yeah.
sense. So it's kind of like they're taking that clay and they're molding it a little bit more.
Hmm. I just like to see a different edge because with
Hmm.
the like, I don't want her to end up, and I like this person. I like Charlotte, but Charlotte is, what's her character?
She's the queen.
She's the queen. That's it.
She's the
Like,
queen. She's the final. She's the final boss in the video game, basically.
she's the final boss. Like, you can't dimensionize like that. Every storyline with Charlotte involves the championship in some way, shape, or form,
Yes,
which I wish wasn't the case because she's a dynamic performer on her own. That she doesn't need to, all eyes, I need to be champion, this sort of thing. Have her kind of struggle a little bit, but it's hard when you're already the queen of the WWE. You know what I mean?
and you only get a certain amount of time for women's wrestling every week on TV. Would do you feel that wrestling or the women's division in wrestling would be helped if they had an all women's show? You know, if they even if it was on the network, like, hi, you have a
Mhm.
network, use it where you have women from all three rosters could wrestle, you know, and they can build up their stories on an all women's show every week.
It really depends on, and this is a cop out kind of answer, but this is how I honestly feel on ratings because I'm not sure how the masses would treat an all women's wrestling show. You know
Put
what
it
I
on the
mean?
network.
There were other things like I think they're doing like they restarted Women's of Wrestling on TV, which
Okay.
is not a part of WWE, and I'm not sure their ratings, but they were kind of put in a tough position because, as you know, during the Vince regime, the tag champs walked out, Naomi and Sasha,
Yes.
and then it's kind of like, all right, we got to rebuild the women's division, and we're trying to make these women's tag titles mean something. And I got to be honest, when you like throw two single stars together and you're gonna be like, all right, they're a tag team now, it's a tough sell,
How so?
and
However, I do love the Sonya and Chelsea pairing.
no, yeah, I absolutely
Yes.
agree, and I think we're getting in that direction where we are gonna have solid teams. Like we do have the Sonya and Chelsea pairing. You had the Damage Control pairing. You have Caden Carter and Katana Chance.
Yes.
So I think slowly but surely we might be seeing that tag team, that women's tag team division, a little
Hmm.
bit stronger. I'm holding out hope. Maybe that's on me,
I'm
but
gonna I will add to the minus to the thumbs down though.
mhm.
I think they dropped the ball when they brought up the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions. They had one match. They had their titles. They lost their titles to Ronda and to Shayna. We haven't seen them since.
No, yeah,
It's like they brought them up just to lose the titles. They didn't need to bring them up. They could have had them lose the titles in NXT.
and yeah, and then Ronda and Shayna lost. I think a week
Each
or two
other.
later.
They've lost each other.
They lost each other, and they lost the titles a week or
Yeah.
two later. So
Hmm.
it didn't really do anybody any good. You know what I
Unless
mean?
unless the whole purpose was to combine the titles and get rid of and make less titles. But
Which isn't always a bad thing.
yeah, although I mean, I mean, if they're going to actually have the women's tag team champions go to every show, then I do want to actually, it seems like, they've, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that the women's tag team champions showed up on NXT.
Hmm.
I do remember Nia and Shayna down there in a match with Dakota and Raquel.
And now with more crossover between the main roster and NXT, which I
Yes,
think is a
I
really
like
good
that.
move. Yeah, I think it's a really good move, mostly because one, the TV contract negotiations are coming up anyway. You want to
Yeah,
make sure you get your stars on that show, and also you want to get them to rub elbows with the future in
yeah.
some way, shape, or form.
I
And
like that on Friday night when they were in Orlando and they had the NXT characters on there.
yeah, and just a nice little cameo. Like you had that,
Yes.
you had Shawn Michaels appear, all
Yeah,
those kind of things, kind of tying everything, trying to make sense of everything, even though you had a Raw superstar defend an NXT championship
on
on
SmackDown.
SmackDown.
And the last time a Raw super or a SmackDown superstar, sorry, won an NXT championship, uh,
He had the
when he
big
was not an
hand.
NXT wrestler, was Solo, and he wasn't allowed to hold that title. He had to give it back.
Yeah, so again, it's
But
like one
things
of
have
those like
changed.
yeah,
Things have
you know,
changed. Rules have
it's like
changed.
it's one of those kind of again, they make their own rules. They can
Yeah,
do what they want with it,
they
I
sure they
suppose.
sure can.
Yeah. But another thing that could be a con, but is kind of a pro in some ways. Triple H is a very big NWA guy, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
and how he booked NXT Black and Gold. If you noticed, his primary champions were pretty much heels. If you think about it, you had
Yeah,
Ciampa, you had Samoa Joe, you had Adam Cole,
baby.
you had Shayna Baszler, you had Asuka, who was kind of like flip flopping back and forth
Mm-hmm.
between face and heel.
I think the biggest face champions they had was Finn and Shinsuke.
Yeah, and but all the other baby faces who had tremendous arcs in NXT, like Sami Zayn and Johnny Gargano, once
Mm-hmm.
they won the title, they didn't hold it for that long.
Correct.
You know what I mean? So that's my only thing that WWE now is seeming more like an NWA product with the bad guy always holding the top championship or championship in general, and you got to fight that underneath babyface, which is easier to do, which is why I think with Bianca it was more of a challenge because once you fend off one bad guy, you have to kind of create the other bad guy.
Yes.
Because if you remember, Bianca's problem was there was a lack of women to fight. Like she fought off all damage control. Then I think they had to turn Alexa Bliss,
Mm-hmm.
and then uh, you had to turn Asuka too. You know what I mean? So it was a bunch of things that didn't really work out in her favor with that. And I think with Triple H, my only concern is there going to be enough of a bad guy contingent once we get that crowning moment of the next babyface championship who beats Roman Reigns, whoever that may be.
Money's in the chase, Rich. The
Hmm.
money's in the chase.
I agree.
You
It's
know,
just
people pay to watch the chase. You know,
mhm.
um, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree. You know, part of me wonders if Roman or when Roman doesn't lose that championship, how how long till he wins it back,
Yeah,
or you know, um,
if he wins it back.
I mean, I think a good barometer to look at is Seth Rollins. I mean, is this going to be a long run for him, or is this going to be a quick run?
Hmm.
Is
How
Finn?
how has Seth Rollins, in your opinion, have has been as world champion?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm still getting used to that as a world championship.
Hmm.
Um, I like him as a champion. I like the quality of matches. I like the quality of opponents. I love the fact that this is giving an opportunity for a guy like Finn Balor to be in the main event. I like the story between the two of them. I love the matches with the two of them. I love the backstage interactions. I love the Judgment Day beating up on Seth and making him, vulnerable. Um, again, I'm still, to me, I sometimes have to look at, look down and make sure, wait, okay, world champion, you know, um, because, it's, it, it's still a new title to me. But on the other hand, he was a perfect person to be that first champion and set the bar.
Do you think it hurt that he didn't have an official babyface turn?
You mean that he basically his turn basically just came from people singing his song?
Yeah.
I mean, do you really need though? I mean, it's do we really need him to have an actual baby face? You know, I mean, one minute he was in the ring feuding with Cody Rhodes.
Hmm.
I think we're supposed to forget that he injured, quote unquote, air quotes, he injured Cody Rhodes the night after the Hell in the Cell on Raw.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe we're supposed to forget that, but he went from being very hated to all of a sudden by the end of the summer, after his feud with Riddle, by the time we got to September, yeah, I hear you. He was popular because people love singing a song, but I mean, also the people that had him in the ring with at that point stopped being, the faces, and they started putting him in there with the heels. So I think it was right. I think is, I mean, his unofficial official turn was probably when he started going in there with Austin Theory for the U.S. title.
right?
right? Like,
Because yeah, that was
that was
around
after
that time.
that was after SummerSlam.
Yeah, that was around the fall, I believe.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, Rollins beat Bobby Lashley after he got attacked by Brock, and that's how
Yes.
Rollins won the U.S. title. And
Hmm.
then right after that, after he lost to Austin Theory, people began cheering him, which I felt was like a little bizarre just because of the theme song, you know. And
Yes.
it's one of those things where I'm concerned that people might look at him as a number two rather than a number one on the brand, especially when you have the
Yes.
same brand as Cody, who is
Correct.
obviously in that John
He's just
Cena like
yeah.
position,
He's the guy on that show. Yes.
which
But
is
I do like that he wasn't, Cody. I do like the fact that Cody wasn't just handed that title
mhm,
because you give Cody that championship, or sorry, Cody wins that championship,
mhm.
and it's immediately looked at as a second championship because he couldn't beat Roman. So I like the fact that they haven't really put him in that championship zone. They
I
did
think they
briefly.
might. I think they might
They
for
did briefly. They did
yeah,
briefly, and then Brock came down
yeah,
at
and I think Cody and Seth they're gonna face off probably later this year, and
some point.
where Seth will get his win back,
Sure,
you know,
without a doubt.
which I believe is the plan. Again, we're not on the inside. We're just
No
making guesses from being
guesses.
wrestling fans from years and years and years.
Do you think they
But
go with war games again, or do you think they go back to brand versus brand, champions versus champions at Survivor Series?
uh I can see them go either way. I would like it if they incorporated the two, have like a
Yeah.
nice meeting of the minds. Maybe like the winner of War Games, if it's a SmackDown Raw kind of deal, wins like the last entry in the Rumble or something like that. And that's another thing that I appreciate Triple H did during this era. Now we don't have pay-per-views named after match types.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, it's October and we must have TLC. Oh, it's
Yes.
September, we have to have Hell in a Cell. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
now it's more nuanced of having Hell in a Cell when
Yes.
it feels like we need a Hell in a Cell.
Correct.
So I really do appreciate that Triple H now is making Hell in a Cell and match types mean more because it's not just a convenient, oh, where it's TLC, so this has to be a tables match. So I do appreciate that point. But do I see them going back to the brand supremacy thing? I mean, it's possible. It just depends how they do it because how many times are we to see one show invade another show in order to cause conflict? And why are they invading the other show just for bragging rights? We already had a bragging rights pay per view, and that didn't really turn out that well.
That's
You
true.
know what I mean? So it is what it is. I'll be open to it as long as it's creative enough, and in my opinion.
As long as it's not a Raw versus SmackDown Hell in the Cell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's
because
just like
or Raw versus SmackDown War Games, because
yeah.
there's no need. You don't have a need for a War Games for just guys that are in there because of their brand.
Another
So,
questionable creative move by Triple H is Reign is remember the World Heavyweight Title tournament featured both people from Raw and SmackDown when it was
mhm.
supposed to be a Raw title.
Well, yes, but if they won, they would then become Raw champion, and they'd
I
be
don't
on
know.
the Raw show.
It's just I don't know. That was just kind of weird to me.
I don't think it was explained that much, but the way I interpreted it was, anybody who enters this tournament, if you win, you're going to Raw with the championship, and then
Yeah,
if you lose a championship, you'll go back to SmackDown.
I just wish it was explained clearer. I think that's my only like complaint. But
Blame Michael
going,
Cole. It's
yeah.
Michael Cole's fault.
Well, why? But hey, let's give props. Now Michael Cole on commentary sounds like he wants to be there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He's very excited.
What about
Also,
when Michael Cole starts throwing out other wrestling organizations on
yeah,
TV, like New Japan?
yeah, like New Japan, like PWG or something, and then Progress. He name dropped. And another thing is now we're back to two-person announce booths,
Yes. Hmm.
which is thankful for my ears. And there hasn't been a nearly enough camera cuts on my show, so I don't get sick from Kevin Dunn hitting the camera cut button after somebody gave someone a snapmare. So I'm very
Yes.
grateful that I am not like getting
Good
motion
point.
sickness
Good point.
while watching Raw or SmackDown.
Good point. Good point.
But what would you say was Triple H's biggest pro since his taking over as creative?
Biggest pro, I think the storytelling. You know, I think the storytelling is, you have longer storytelling. It's not just, feuds for the week that, and they're done by the following week.
Hmm.
I think we have long term storytelling again, um, which leads to more creativity.
What would you say would have been your favorite stories that happened during this time?
In the last year,
Hmm.
um, I mean, the Bloodline story is definitely number one.
Agreed.
I love it. Again. I mean, Monday nights. I can't wait to see what the Judgment Day is doing. Um, you know, I do like, other with other things too. Um, Big fan of, with, with just lost my train of thought. Big fan of with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. As you know with their interworkings with him, as Kevin goes crazy every week, and Sammy's calming him down. But then again, they're taking on tag teams on both programs. I like that. Um, I like with the women. Um, I like how the women have, you know, and I know you said it was a negative, but to me, there are women now that are being shown that were not shown a year ago. You know, I mean, look at Chelsea Green. She was released, and now she's back. With a character.
Right. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So and which goes back to what you were saying before with they're not, if they have something for you, they're using you. If they don't, they're not just throwing you on TV.
Yeah.
Um,
There's like a reason, like a backstage segment that
yes,
happened. That hey, this is why this match is happening.
and
You
we're
know what I
also
mean?
not, when we had to say RIP to the 24/7 championship, but I think that's okay.
I think that's for the better. You know,
Yeah, I think so.
not for our truth though.
No, I can't wait for our truth to come back. He's
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
I
And
miss him.
with the woman, my only concern is with Rhea. There's a limited talent pool for who can she works with, because when your first defense is with Natalia because everybody else is busy and Natalia hasn't really been featured, then it I get start to get a little concerned. But again, Rhea's just kind of making everything work as she does. But I would like to see her having some solo program, except but not being the side piece of the Judgment Day and their
Yes.
stories. That's my only concern. Same thing with Charlotte and Bianca being a little bit too stagnant, but with the addition of Asuka and with the addition of Io and that Money in the Bank briefcase and
Hmm.
Bailey, it really is refreshing.
Another side story is
And with Shotzi too,
yeah. You got that you got the Shotzi story thrown in. Shotzi cutting her hair off.
yeah,
You know, great story.
yeah. Which
Although I'm not gonna
she
lie,
did in solidarity with her sister who has cancer, which is
yes, I mean
fantastic. I actually
she
read
did.
somebody blamed it was a really stupid tweet. Like somebody blamed Vince McMahon for the awful creative direction, and
uh,
I'm just like,
Dude,
dude, it's like
she
if
wanted
your
to
mind
incorporate
is
that.
on
Yeah.
if your mind's on Vince that much about like every silly idea that happens in
Yes.
WWE, because Triple H could have some silly ideas too. So
Yeah.
I
Hey,
mean,
listen.
in
I
NXT we had No Way Jose, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Dude, a great guy though. No way, Jose.
no, yeah, a wonderful person, but it's just like once you get No Way Jose, what else you got?
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
like to see them develop No Way Jose.
I don't even think I mean, I don't even know where he is right now. He didn't even make his way to AEW. So,
Hmm.
who
All
knows?
right.
Maybe he's wrestling under a mask somewhere.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah,
Maybe he'll come.
hopefully. Yeah,
Maybe
maybe
he'll
he'll
come
come back.
back. Maybe Carlito, when he makes it back, we'll
Yeah.
we'll bring him
Or
in.
maybe he'll team with Juan Cena when he gets back.
Juan Cena,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, Seth, final thoughts on the Triple H era. What do you think about it? And are you hopeful for WWE? Like, are you as excited as WWE as you were when you were a kid, or what's your excitement
Yes.
level?
And I've always been a solid WWE guy. You know this about me, but I gotta tell you, I mean, I'm back. I'm more invested in the stories now, for the first time in a long time.
Hmm.
I'm not just watching it to watch it. Um, I'm excited. I think the excitement level, you can see in the crowd too. The excitement level is there. I mean, these shows, the Garden Show was the level. It's like level of excitement. I mean, I remember, you could turn on shows, at one point a year ago, and they were piping in the crowd noise. You know,
Right.
they're not doing that anymore. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, the crowds are into it. The matches are great. The product is great. They're selling out, and it's the way it should be. So I think I'm giving AAA Triple H, sorry, a AAA rating
Ooh,
for today.
high rating. I would give him a similar rating. I think he's done a very good job. A lot of things where it's just like, I'm not sure about that. Then you let it play out. Then I'm like, okay, I wasn't as like the whole LN8 situation. I know everyone's kind of up in arms, but it's like,
Let it play
look,
out.
I don't think they're deaf. I think they know what they have, and then we'll go on from there. But
Yeah.
anyways, Seth, always a pleasure having you on the show.
Richie, thanks for having me again. It's my pleasure. I can't wait to become a four-time visitor.
I'm sure you'll be there right after SummerSlam to tell us your live experience on
I,
SummerSlam.
I would love to do it. It'd be a
All
good time.
right. Again, you could always follow this show at Retold Richie Mars on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I had a very infamous TikTok that went a little bit wrestling viral about Jimmy turning on Jay. You could watch that and why reasons why. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but that's my theory. So we'll see you again next time. Same place, same channel. TTFN, top for now. Seth, would you like to give parting words to the audience?
Always a pleasure being part of the podcast, Richie. Thank you, thank the listeners for the handful that tune in for me. I appreciate it, but I'm sure they're here for you. So, but again, thanks for having me on. Again, it's a blast. I love coming on and hanging out with you guys.
Thank you so much. All right. See you guys next time.